Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, books, and popular culture. Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome to this week's show. Hope you're doing well. My name is Bruce Markison, and once again, I'm joined by producer and co-host Tracy Asteria. Tracy, how are you?
I'm doing really good, Bruce. Still trying to keep warm in Nova Scotia, but that's normal for this time of year. How's everything been going with you?
Yeah, we're getting a few indications that spring is coming. One of them is baseball has started spring training down in Florida and out west in Arizona. So
Wow,
that's always a good sign. And hey, the temperature got over 30 degrees this week. First
that's
time
such
in
a
about a
bonus.
month that has happened. So we're glad for that.
Oh,
We've got a really interesting show, as you know, Tracy, coming up, and it really perfectly ties in to an anniversary. So we are recording on Valentine's Day, February 14th. And this is the exact anniversary of the debut of the 1931 classic Dracula with Bela Lugosi. So it came out 95 years ago to the day. And that actually ties in directly with one of the films we're going to talk about in a moment. So think about that. 95 years ago, Dracula entered theaters nationwide. It started in a couple of isolated cities.
hmm.
But then on February 14th, 1931, it debuted across the country and had an immediate impact, terrified viewers, got mostly positive reviews, made Bela Lugosi a star, and really kicked off this wave of horror that we would see for 2 decades from Universal Studios. So, how fortunate that we're broadcasting on this historic anniversary.
Oh my gosh, 95 years. I find that so hard to fathom. That's incredible. That's incredible, actually. I'll have to watch that tonight after we're done recording.
And you know what? Also, on this evening that we're recording, Sven is showing the original Dracula from 1931. And I'm sure that they planned it this way. They probably knew that this was the anniversary and they thought, well, let's showcase the granddaddy, as I like to call it, of all horror movies.
Wow. Oh, that's super. So will you be watching that tonight?
Well, I usually tape Sven, so I'll probably
Mhm.
watch it later on. You know, they have to fill a 2.5 hour block on MeTV because it goes from 8 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. Eastern time.
Mhm.
And most of those old horror films from the 1930s, they're like usually in the range of an hour and 10 minutes, hour and 15 minutes. They were pretty short back then. So
Right.
they'll have a lot of commercials and he'll do a lot of skits. And I'm sure he'll show, tapes of some of his convention appearances, which he typically does. So I may fast forward through some of those, although I do want to see some of his in between stuff. I kind of like his goofy cornball sense of humor. But it's a film that I think is less than an hour and a half, and it fits into a 2.5 hour slot. So you can see that they do have to fill with a lot of material.
That's right. Oh, awesome.
We, of course, do not have to fill that much time. You imagine if we did a 2.5 hour show?
I'd have no voice left, Bruce. Neither would you.
Oh, you'd have to pick me up off the floor. I'd be exhausted. Yeah. In my younger days, when I did sports talk radio, we sometimes were on the air for 5 hours. We did long marathon shows, but we had commercial breaks. We carried the news at the top of the hour. We had some other features that we ran. So we weren't talking continuously. You imagine doing that for 5 hours.
Oh my goodness.
With this show, we don't have really commercial breaks, although we sometimes do take a break in between the two films we discuss. But going straight through for 2.5 hours without taking a breath, man, that's a lot.
It is.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep it a little more concise, usually in the range of about an hour or so, give or take a few minutes. So, Tracy, this week we are going to tackle two films, and one of them is related to what Bela Lugosi did 95 years ago. It is the newest version of Dracula. It actually debuted in Europe in 2025, but has just hit American theaters as of 2026. It's called Dracula, A Love Tale. We're going to get into that in a moment. And then the second film that we will discuss is a film that came out 40 years ago. Hard to believe, The Hitcher with Rutger Hauer and C. Thomas Howell. So two films that have absolutely nothing to do with each other, other than the fact I think they're both entertaining. One of them, The Hitcher, is an absolute classic in my mind. And this new Dracula is, I think, going to be a fascinating piece of discussion for the both of us. So we're going to get right to it. And you're going to start things off by telling us about the latest adaptation of Dracula.
So interesting enough, this film, its original title is Dracula, A Love Tale. And it's a French Gothic fantasy horror film written by Luc Besson. And it runs for just a little over 2 hours. The movie stars Caleb Landry Jones as Vlad, otherwise known as Dracula, Zoe Blue as Elisabetta, and Christoph Waltz as the priest. And like you mentioned, the film was released in France in 2025 in July, but it just recently premiered last weekend on February the 6th here in North America. So the story, it opens up with Vlad and his wife, Elisabetta. They're deeply in love, and the film really leans into that romance right away. Their relationship is super intense. It sets like this whole emotional setting for the rest of this movie. So before Vlad leaves for battle, there is a key scene between him and a priest where he kind of demands, I guess, reassurance from God that God will protect his wife while he is away. And that moment is very pivotal in this movie. So while Vlad is at war, and it's pretty instant. He's not gone for long. I think it all takes place the same day. But Elisabetta, she's captured by enemy forces and she's ultimately killed. She dies in his arms, and this loss completely shatters him. He is full of grief, and that grief quickly turns into rage and betrayal. He then confronts the priest and violently rejects his faith, and he commits an act of sacrilege that marks the turning point of his fate. So this is the moment that puts him on the path to becoming Dracula, cursed with immortality and cut off from salvation. And from that point, we see Vlad go basically from century to century to century. He is consumed by the belief that Elisabetta's pure soul will be reincarnated and that he can find her once again. He builds this network of vampire-ish type followers to help with the search of his wife. And one of these followers is a vampire named Maria, and she's going to have a key role later on in this story. And one unusual element this movie adds is Vlad wears this mystical perfume, and he uses it to lure people towards him so he can turn them easily. There's even a musical number and a dance sequence during the stretch. And that is like so totally unexpected. Like I didn't see that coming at all. I thought it was a little bit unusual, but at the same time, it definitely made me giggle. I'm like, what the heck is this? So that's kind of like the base of the story before we really get into like the whole Dracula side of things. So I'm curious, just from that initial piece, what did you think as this movie first started out?
Well, Tracy, the first 15 or so minutes of the movie, when it's way back in time,
Mm.
and you have Vlad Dracul, basically Vlad the Impaler,
Mhm.
that some
Yes.
people believe Bram Stoker used as an influence for his character of Dracula. That's kind of debated by historians today,
Mhm.
and we could do probably a whole segment on that. But the beginning of the film, when it goes back to those ancient times, is very reminiscent of the 1992 version of Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. And that's actually my favorite version of Dracula. It was a big budget, epic film. Gary Oldman played the Count. You had Winona Ryder, you had Keanu Reeves, Anthony Hopkins plays Van Helsing. I saw that in the theater. It's a wonderful movie, and it's still my favorite version of Dracula. So this movie, directed by Luc Besson, very reminiscent of that at the
Mhm.
beginning. Some would say that he kind of stole some of that film. I don't know if that's the right word. He's definitely influenced by that. He obviously saw the movie
Mhm.
and he wanted to incorporate that theme into the beginning. So that's the first thing that I came across. And then you talk about the wartime scene where Vlad is, he's in his bedroom with his wife. They're knocking on the door, telling him, "Hey, you got to stop fooling around. We've got a battle. We need you out in the field." And they put his armor on, and he goes out into this epic battle that takes place. And they use trickery. They use a fire to defeat the enemy. And as you mentioned, while this is going on, his wife was being led in another direction by some of his servants, but they end up getting caught by the enemy. I'm not sure why he didn't just leave her in the castle. That seemed to me like a safer place. But he
Yes.
decided to take her away from that. That turned out to be a bad move. And by the time he realizes what's going on, Vlad gets there when she is essentially being confronted in this big open field by 3 or 4 enemy soldiers. And just at the moment that he gets there to help her, she is slain. She is taken down, and he, of course, freaks out. That wartime scene, though, that preceded his attempted rescue, really had an epic feeling to it. And again, very much like the Francis Ford Coppola film. So that was the first thought I had watching the movie. Now, it does change considerably after that. As we
Mhm.
move into more modern day Paris, when I say modern day, I guess we're talking 19th century, the
Right.
movie takes on a much different feel from the Coppola movie. But the early part of it, that's what I thought about very much. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so the story, like, it jumps forward about 400 years after that epic battle, and then you get more into, like, familiar Dracula territory. We're first introduced to the priest, a doctor, and a woman who is a patient at this it looks like maybe a mental institution, an old kind of fashioned hospital. She's locked in chains in the basement. And I think she's wearing a wedding dress too. So she's like completely locked up. And this is Maria.
Yeah.
She was one of the vampire followers set to find his wife. And
Yeah.
then we skip ahead and we encounter Jonathan Harker. And he's traveling to Dracula's remote castle where Vlad now exists as a very lonely and deteriorating figure surrounded by dark, gargoyle like minion creatures that
Hmm.
guard the grounds. So when Harker arrives, he's greeted by Dracula. They have dinner and conversation. And it really isn't long before something happens and Harker is attacked. And Dracula seems ready to just let him die, but instead he grants Harker kind of like your last wish. Like, what is your last request? And Harker wants to know what Dracula's story is. So he sits down, they're talking, and he tells him his background history. And through this story, Dracula actually discovers that Harker is engaged to be married to a woman named Mina. And Dracula sees a picture of Mina and he understands that this is the reincarnated soul of his long lost Elizabetta.
Hmm.
once he realizes that, his whole focus completely shifts. Dracula immediately decides he's on a mission and he needs to find Mina and bring her back. But before leaving to go find Mina, he restores his strength and his youth in a very violent feeding frenzy at a religious sanctuary. So this religious sanctuary, it's like, I want to say it's a nunnery because it's there's nothing but nuns there. So you just picture a violent but entertaining feeding frenzy because again, it feels like a musical number in a way. It's really strange. Um, so yeah, that was an interesting segment. And then Parker, he's still kept prisoner and he's still kind of locked up. But eventually he escapes these gargoyle-like minion creatures and he returns to warn Nina of this danger. So Harker, along with this priest and a doctor, they try to keep Mina safe, but Dracula reaches her anyway. And rather than just kind of attacking her and biting her on the neck to turn her, he tries to awaken her past memories and to draw her back to him emotionally. So he presents her with like this little musical box, and this music is supposed to remind her of her past life. So Mina's then brought back to Dracula's castle. Her memories are kind of returning and they're really quite strong. She remembers her past life and her love. And then she asks to be turned so they will never be separated by death again. And this leads to another epic battle where Harker, the doctor, the priest, and like all of the allies, they attempt to stop Dracula and to save everybody. And like at that point, the ending kind of took a little bit of a different direction than many traditional Dracula adaptations. And it just gave this version a little bit of a different twist. So that's kind of like the basis of this story. And I'm curious, Bruce, what did you think after like all of that?
Yeah, there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
One of the things I like about this movie, it is very creative. They try to do some really different things with this story. So you mentioned they introduced this perfume, which
Hmm.
I guess basically makes him attractive to every woman that he runs into. And it basically makes everybody that he encounters willing to do whatever he says. So he has this incredible power. And I've never heard of this kind of a perfume or cologne being introduced into a Dracula film or a vampire film in general. So that gives Dracula the ability to really people control their minds, make everybody fall in love with him or follow his wishes or do both. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. Then you have the introduction of the gargoyle creatures. Instead of the vampire brides, we have the gargoyles. Now, some people have criticized this because the gargoyles are obviously CGI.
Yes. Yeah.
We know they're not real in terms of this is not practical effects. This is computer generated effects. But I understand that Besson, he needed to do something different than the vampire brides because Dracula is so obsessed with finding his wife. You know, he's not interested in anybody else.
Hmm.
He's only interested in her, finding her, reincarnating her if he can. So it's not consistent if he's going to have 4 or 5 vampire brides hanging around the house. So he has
That's
to
right.
replace them with something. He decides to do it with the gargoyles. And even though they do look kind of fake because it is CGI, I think it's kind of interesting. If they could have come up with something animatronic, for example, that really would have worked well.
Hmm.
And the gargoyles, in some ways they're more cute than they are frightful, but it's interesting. It's something different. It's willing to go into different kinds of directions. So I kind of like
Hmm.
that. And then the whole story of Dracula, really feeling betrayed at the beginning of the film. He's a churchgoer. He's in contact with the local priest. He talks to him all the time. He does everything he's supposed to do in terms of following the priest, his God, his religion. And then he feels betrayed when his wife is killed as an offshoot of this battle that he's got into. And he decides to take revenge. He blames the priest. Well, he's really blaming God, but the priest is going to take the brunt of it. So he is taken out early on. And that whole storyline about, Dracula, when we see him at the early part of the movie, he's married and then his wife is taken away. And we bring in this whole aspect of religion. He's betrayed, or he feels he's betrayed by his God, by his priest. And that, again, is something very different that we see in most of these Dracula films. So I like the fact that Luc Besson was willing to venture into different areas instead of just giving us the same old approach to Dracula. The gargoyles, again, kind of a hit and miss proposition, but I see what he was trying to do. I also thought it was interesting, without giving up too much, toward the end of the film, when there's a whole resolution of this conflict between Dracula and the people in Paris, we learn that the gargoyles are actually these young boys. And we don't know a lot beyond that. I thought that was very interesting.
Yes.
Exactly how did they come to be, gargoyle type creatures? Were they held captive by Dracula? Were they already at the castle? None of that is really answered, but that's kind of an interesting storyline. So I kind of liked it. Again, it would have been better with practical effects, but he needed to do something other than the vampire brides. And this is what he came up with, gargoyle type creatures. Not so bad in my mind.
Yeah. No, and it was interesting. I was really surprised to, like, at the end, to see those gargoyles come out as young, gray, emaciated children. It was really strange. I would love to
Yeah.
know kind of like what his idea was behind that, but it was definitely a unique twist for sure. But
Yeah. Now those boys, they come out of the castle and they're running. They got a lot of energy, but you're
mhm.
right. They are pretty thin. They hardly have any clothing at all on. And you just wonder what exactly their backstories were. It makes you think about what might have been. And I
Mhm.
guess at some point during the movie, maybe they could have explored that. It's already a 2.5 or 2 hour, 10-minute film. So I guess they didn't want to go into that. Maybe that ended up on the cutting room floor. But it's an interesting side story to this whole Dracula.
Yeah, I guess that's what our imagination is for.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Um, so yeah, like, for me, I'm again, like, I'll mention this again, I'm not really, like, a big fan of love stories or romance heavy type movies. Um, but this one was a little bit different. Like, this one, it's Dracula, a love story. But again, this one was a little bit different. The love story is the backbone, but there's a lot more going on in this movie than just their romance.
Mhm.
I really, really liked seeing who Vlad was before he became Dracula,
Yeah.
because we get this backstory. It was very tragic, but it made things really, really interesting. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to have happened. I mean, we saw maybe 20 minutes or so of his backstory, and then we learned a lot more as he was kind of talking to Harker through this
Hmm.
movie.
Yeah.
I thought the movie looked great. The costumes were absolutely stunning. The scenery, the Gothic settings, they were gorgeous, and it was a lovely atmosphere. Like, it was beautiful. Um, I thought I read somewhere too that the armor that they were wearing in battle, it was actually designed by the same people that created the Game of Thrones wardrobe, like that
Mm.
series.
Yeah.
So again, like, that is top notch. Um, there was even a few bits of humor sprinkled throughout this movie, which yeah, I didn't expect humor at all in a Dracula movie. Um, but I go back to, that long stretch where Vlad is wandering throughout the centuries looking for Elizabetta, um, doing those dance scenes, like, I kept getting flashes of Johnny Depp in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. There was just, like, something, I don't know, it was like the look, maybe his look was kind of
Mm.
reminiscent of that. It was just slightly odd, very eccentric energy, and it just kind of, like, reminded me of that at times. It was so weird. Um,
Yeah.
the tone of the movie bounces around a little bit. Um, it can feel really weird at times, but other times it was fine, and it kinda worked. And performance-wise, I thought it was pretty solid across the board. Caleb Landry Jones, he really stood out for me, and I haven't seen him in anything before. I actually never heard of him before, but he really sold the character, and I thought he did an excellent job. And Christoph Waltz, as the priest. So we remember him from the Frankenstein film by Del Toro. He was in that. Um, he was so quirky. Like, he was just a quirky priest, not a priest like you would expect, like, super religious. Like, he was quirky, and so quirky, in fact, that I could see him playing, like, an exorcist role in a Mike Flanagan production.
Mm. Yeah.
That what he reminded me of. Um, Overall, I wasn't really a huge fan of the way that this movie ended. I thought it was sad. I didn't wanna be sad watching this movie.
Yeah.
And, it just that part didn't really hit me well. It's not a bad movie. I don't think it's a bad movie. It's not your typical Dracula movie, and definitely if you're thinking it's a horror film, it is absolutely not a horror film in my opinion, but it's worth a watch. It really is. Um, there's just a little bit of everything going on, and you just go in with an open mind, and, it's a decent story, and overall, I did give it 3 stars. Um, it was interesting. That's kind of like where I landed. It was interesting. The ending was a little bit it was too sad for me.
Yeah. All right. You don't think it's a horror film? That's interesting to me. I guess you think it's more fantasy than anything?
I think so, yeah, because
Okay.
like, there wasn't really anything to me that I felt was horror related. It was more kind of like this epic fantasy kind of story, kind of like
Hmm.
a love story, fantasy, I guess, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a love story, but I definitely see it as a horror film.
Mhm,
You look at Dracula, he is monstrous, but he's not completely evil. So maybe
mhm,
that's why you don't really think of it as a horror movie. He's not just wantonly killing everybody in sight. His main goal is to find and reunite with Elisabetta,
yeah,
who I guess is the reincarnation somehow. At least she seems to think so. He seems to think so as well. But there's some scenes here where people are being attacked, people are being
mhm,
killed, not always by Dracula, but sometimes by other people as well. There's at the battle scene at the end where he's a master swordsman and he's trying to fend off what appears to be the French Foreign Legion that has come and has joined the priest and Harker and
yes,
the other people as
yeah,
they're trying to rescue Elisabetta. So I saw it as a mix of both fantasy and horror. I see elements of both going on here. Let me pick up on a couple of other things that you mentioned. Visually beautiful, atmospheric
mm,
film from those early battle scenes all the way to the more modern setting of 19th century Paris. And Paris is really the focal point, not London, not England. So that's another area that's different. You talked about the performances. Caleb Landry Jones, I thought was excellent in this role. He
mhm,
had, that believable kind of Romanian, Transylvanian accent. It was
yes,
very creepy. I got to say one thing though, and I've seen other pictures of him when he's not in this movie.
mhm,
He's not very attractive in this film. They do not make Dracula handsome. This is not Bela Lugosi. I mean, he's not even as good looking as Gary Oldman, and I don't think Gary Oldman is great looking as Draculas go. Maybe that's why he needed the perfume because he's got that big mouth. He has kind of unusual facial features, and I've seen pictures of him elsewhere without the
Mhm.
makeup and without this presentation, and he looks a lot better. But man, they did not make him attractive at all. So he had to use that perfume. Otherwise, they'd be running from this guy. Don't you think?
Oh my gosh. It's very strange. Like, I don't know, like, right from the hairdo that they gave him, like, the original hairdo when he was kind of, like, old and decrepit, like, that was very strange. But then as the 400 years passed, they kinda, like, gave him this weird, like, I I don't know, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory Bob hairstyle.
Yeah, yeah,
And then the little, like, bonnet on top, and I'm like, "Well, that just doesn't make any sense, like, how is that, like that's not mystical, that's not kind of like, I don't know, not magical or anything,
no,
you know?"
yeah.
But
He's not a model for GQ. That's for sure. And you mentioned the early hairdo that he shows off when
mhm.
he's very old and he's first being visited by Harker. I like to call that the vampire bun. And this was another part of the film that was very reminiscent of the 1992 Dracula, because
Yes.
Gary Oldman had a very similar hairdo, although it was parted more in the middle and it kind of was almost heart shaped. But this didn't have a heart shape, but it had a very weird shape to it. I mean, it was strange. But when he first appears with that vampire bun, I'm like, yeah, this is Gary Oldman from 1992, 34 years earlier. And it's another part of this film where Luc Besson is obviously influenced by what Coppola did with that movie. So,
Yeah.
yeah, his presentation, his visual look, very strange. And then you have Christoph Waltz. I think he was as good as anybody in this
Mhm.
movie. Every film I've seen this guy in, he's fantastic. He did a great job in Frankenstein, even
Yes.
though he's killed off fairly early in that movie. He was also in Django Unchained. He was outstanding in that. I haven't seen Inglorious Bastards all the way through, but I've heard that
Mhm.
he was excellent in that movie. There's something about him, the way that he speaks. He learned English at a very late age. He was, born in Austria.
Mhm.
He has Austrian German heritage. He picked up English very late, and maybe that contributes to his unusual cadence. But I always it's very effective in all these movies. And he plays this priest. He's basically a non-violent version of Van Helsing.
Yes.
And he plays this role perfectly. He's a very wise man. He has a lot of knowledge of Dracula, of vampires in general, but he also offers a touch of humor. He kind of looks at things in almost a lighthearted way, maybe to make it more digestible for him. And it works. I thought he was excellent in the film. And then the young actress, uh, her last name Blue, right?
Yeah, Zoe Blue.
Zoe Blue, and she is the daughter of someone in Hollywood, correct?
Yeah, Rosanna Arquette.
Yeah,
It's her
I
name
never would have
child.
thought that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought she was excellent in this film too. She did a very good job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting because when I first saw her, I was like, I know I don't know this person. I've never heard of them before, but she looked so familiar. So she
Mm,
really resembles her mom. Like she really does. Like in Rosanna Arquette's early days.
mm.
Um, I remember one of the movies I saw with Rosanna Arquette was Desperately Seeking Susan with
Yeah.
Madonna, and, like, if you kind of, like, look at her mom back in those days and put them side by side, they she's a spitting image of her mother way
Mm,
back in the day. Yeah.
yeah.
So, very interesting.
Yeah. That was the movie that put Rosanna Arquette on the map, really.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And she dressed like Madonna in the film, and This is back in the 80s, I think. This is going back a ways.
Oh,
So yeah.
absolutely.
So we've got Hollywood royalty, and this young actress, the daughter, does a very good job. I'll tell you a scene that really stood out for me was when we haven't talked about Dr. Dumont. He's the guy who runs the asylum. I thought he was an interesting character. And when he presents Maria, who is one of Dracula's converted minions, if you will, not a bride, but someone who has been put out into the field to kind of do intelligence work and try to locate Elizabeth for him. So she is being presented to the priest, and he does a quick examination and determines, yeah, Maria is a vampire. She has a connection to Dracula. She can perhaps help us find where this guy is so we can take him down. And the whole exchange between Maria and the priest, played by Christoph Waltz, I thought was really good in the asylum.
Yeah.
So that was a scene that stood out for me. So a lot to talk about here. Ultimately, what did you give the film in terms of a ranking?
I gave it a 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you liked it?
Yep, I definitely liked it. It was interesting. It was just like an interesting twist. It was the ending. If the ending was a little bit different for me, I probably would have bumped it up a notch or so.
Yeah.
But the ending was sad, and I didn't want to see sad when I watched it.
Right. Yeah, I think the ending was a little bit anticlimactic. Again, it was creative. It was a different kind of a resolution to the situation. It wasn't maybe as violent as we have come to expect at the very end. We usually expect Dracula to be, slain in some way, have a stake through the heart. Without giving too much away, that's not what happens in this film. I really enjoyed the movie. It does have some flaws. The dancing scene, a little bit out of MTV, a little bit humorous. Also, the scene where Dracula is so depressed by the loss of his wife, he keeps going to the top floor of the castle and jumping out the window over and over again. It was like Groundhog Day. That was funny. I don't know if that was intentional. So there are parts of the film that don't really fit the overall tone. But in general, based on the strong visuals, excellent acting across the board, the creative approach by Luc Besson, I enjoyed this film. I always look forward to the new adaptations of Dracula. Are you giving us something different? Are you giving us something unusual? This one does, and it does so in a quality fashion. It's nicely presented. It's beautifully filmed. I think it's entertaining. So I go 3.5 stars. I'll go a little bit higher than you do. So those are our thoughts on the new Dracula, released in North America earlier this year, early in February. Originally known as Dracula: A Love Tale, but as part of its North American release, they're just calling it Dracula. And I think it's a worthy entry in the long history of Dracula films. All right, we're going to take a short time out. We're going to catch our breath. When we come back, we are going to talk about a completely different film, one that celebrates an anniversary in 2026. It is a film I first saw way back in the late 80s called The Hitcher. We'll have some fun with this classic that Rutger Hauer, C. Thomas Howell, really became stars through this one, I think, in a lot of ways. And it's I would say, a modern day classic in some ways. At least I think that. We'll find out what Tracy thinks when we come back on The Ghostly Gallery. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery podcast. Bruce Markison and Tracy Asteria along with you. And on to our next movie. It does celebrate its 40th anniversary in 2026. It's a movie that first came out in 1986, came out with little fanfare, but quickly became a favorite, The Hitcher. So here's the storyline. A young man named Jim Halsey, played by C. Thomas Howell, still very early in his career. And Halsey is driving a rental car in the middle of the night. He is going basically cross country from the Midwest, Chicago, out to San Diego, California. Shortly after it starts to rain, he notices a man standing by the side of the road. Feeling sorry for the man, Jim pulls aside him, offers him a ride. Big mistake there. This strange man, played by Rutger Hauer, tells Jim that his name is John Ryder, but he's evasive when asked about where exactly he wants to go. Ryder's behavior is disturbing to the point that Jim Halsey stops the car, tells Ryder, "Get out. Don't trust you." Ryder refuses. So Jim decides, well, I'll start driving again, even though Ryder is still with me. Tries to make some conversation. For a little bit, it's cordial, but then it quickly turns more threatening. Ryder, at one point, grabs Jim's leg when he believes that he's going to stop the car to investigate a stranded vehicle at the side of the road. And by really grabbing tightly onto Jim's leg and not letting him shift to the brake, he forces Jim to keep going. Then Ryder pulls a knife when Jim comes upon a construction flagman in the road. He tells Jim, "Don't say anything to this guy or else you're going to get it with the knife, with the switchblade." Ryder then tells Jim that he killed the man in the abandoned car and that he plans to do the same to Jim. Now, at first, I think Jim is maybe a little skeptical that this is true, but the way that Ryder is acting, he's becoming quickly more and more convinced that this is a very sinister character. He then notices that the light indicating the passenger side door, it says it's ajar. And he realizes, I've got to stop this right now, pushes Ryder out onto the highway road. Well, after celebrating his narrow escape, Jim comes upon a station wagon carrying a family. We're now in the morning hours, so it's daylight. And as he's coming from behind, looking at the station wagon, he sees the kids in the back of this wagon. And then he sees that Ryder is in the back seat with the kids. Ryder is playing with the kids, but then Ryder starts to stare at Jim. Jim tries to warn the family, tries to pull up next to their station wagon and tell them, hey, this guy you've got in the back seat is dangerous. He's deranged, but to no avail. And then Jim's accidentally run off the road because there's a large tour bus coming the other way on this desert highway. Later on, Jim comes upon that same station wagon, but now it's stopped at an angle by the side of the road. He looks in through the windshield. He sees something horrifying, something that we as the viewer cannot see. We can only imagine what it is, but it's horrifying enough that it causes him to run back to his car, and he promptly throws up, so sickened by what he has seen in that station wagon. Well, Jim starts driving again. He then arrives at a gas station. But it's early in the morning. I guess they haven't opened up yet. Doesn't find anybody working there. For some reason, he decides to go into the gas station building. Another mistake. And there he encounters someone, but it's not an employee. It is John Ryder. Ryder shows Jim that he has his keys. He's taken his keys somehow, but then he throws them onto the ground. And he turns around, he walks outside, and proceeds to hitchhike again with someone else. So thinking that he's escaped again from John Ryder, Jim drives for a while. Things are okay, and then suddenly he's bumped from behind by another car. It's a small truck. And Jim looks into his rearview mirror. Who's riding or driving the truck? It is John Ryder again. He's attempting to run Jim off the road. But after only a few moments, Ryder decides to pull his car off the road into the desert. So once again, he's given Jim Halsey a reprieve. Jim then stops at a large highway gas station, but he finds it is completely empty. Boy, they don't ever seem to have anybody at these stations out in the desert. Where are you going to get gas? And then out of nowhere, Ryder plows through a set of garage doors at the station, and he tries to run Jim over, but narrowly misses him. And you really get the feeling that he could have run him over, and he sort of missed him on purpose. He just wanted to scare him. Ryder then gets out of his car, lights a match onto some gas that has leaked onto the ground. And again, this almost kills Jim. It's a huge explosion. Jim does escape, but the entire station is blown up in the
Mhm.
process. Jim finally finds a roadside stop that has somebody in it. There's a waitress named Nash, and she is getting ready to open for the day. Nash is played by Jennifer Jason Leigh. She lets Jim in, allows him to use a payphone, and he calls the police to inform them about this strange guy, Ryder. He asks that the police meet him at this roadside stop. So while he is waiting, Nash serves Jim a hamburger and French fries. And as he is slowly eating the fries one by one, he places one near his mouth before realizing that it is actually a finger, a human finger. Well, even though Jim doesn't place the finger in his mouth, this has sickened him to no end, as it would anybody. He runs outside, throws up again, and then he sees the two police officers arriving in a car. But instead of helping them, the officers yell at him, tell him get on the ground, and they handcuff him. They believe that Jim, and not this supposed John Ryder, is the perpetrator of these roadside murders. And when the police find a switchblade, which was Ryder's switchblade, in Jim's leather jacket, they're even more convinced that Jim is the guilty one. So Jim is taken to a police station where he is interrogated by the captain. It becomes obvious to the captain that Jim is not any kind of a killer. He's a young, innocent kid who's been thrown into a weird situation. But they decide they're going to keep him there overnight until detectives from Austin, they're in Texas, until these detectives arrive in the morning, and then they can talk to Jim Halsey, find out more information about this strange guy, John Ryder. But before they're able to arrive, Ryder infiltrates the station, and he inflicts more damage while enabling Jim to escape. And thus the framing of Jim continues. Ryder will continue this cat and mouse game with Jim, tormenting him along the way on these highway roads, killing several police officers in the process, and also putting Nash, who is Jim's potential girlfriend. I mean, they've just met, but you feel there's some real chemistry there. She is put into serious danger as well. This will all lead to a very dramatic confrontation on the highway where Jim Halsey and John Ryder go head to head before one of them meets a tragic ending. So that's what happens in this film. It all takes place on the highways. Much of the action is actually in cars, police cars, passenger cars, buses. Very interesting the way the film is done. So, Tracy, I want to get some of your initial thoughts. You're watching this wild, disturbing story for the first time. What'd you think of it?
So it was really interesting because, when you're a kid or a young adult, you always remember, don't ever pick up hitchhikers. You never know what's going to happen, and it's just like one of those rules. You don't pick up hitchhikers. And this movie is basically taking that warning and says, okay, don't pick up hitchhikers, but if you do, what's the absolute worst thing that can actually happen?
Hmm.
And well, this is it.
Yeah.
So, like, what makes it wild to me is just how simple it starts, right? It's just this kid, Jim, on a road trip late at night. He's trying to keep his eyes open because he's so tired. And then he just picks this fella up. And from there, it just like spirals and spirals. Those conversations that the two of them are having in the car are creepy. Like they're
Hmm.
just creepy. There's something off. Nothing's actually happened yet. But then when John Ryder reveals, who he really is, like he's really a killer and he's going to do something terrible. And it's just like after he kind of like reveals that fact, the movie just refuses to give Jim Halsey a break time to catch his breath because it's just like go, 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 go. That
Hmm.
diner scene with the finger, oh, that was terrible. But, oh my god, it was very memorable, like, very because I was, like, watching it again, and he's eating the fries, and then I'm, like, looking at it because, again, I'm watching it on my phone because I move from room to room to finish watching the movie, and I'm like, "Is that a finger?" And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Oh my god, it's a"
yeah,
so, that was terrible. Um, but man, the way that John Ryder kept cropping up and like all these different places, and just when you think poor Jim, he's gonna crap out and he's gonna die, he's not because Ryder gives him this break again.
yeah,
And those psychological games are just so bizarre and it doesn't even feel real. And it's like a nightmare. So it's like you're watching this nightmare play out. Um, it's like this urban legend that just comes to life, and it's super intense story. And I know it doesn't have like a lot of um different scenery because it does take place in like gas stations and cars and highways, but it's impactful.
yeah.
It was an impactful story for sure.
Oh, yeah. On that French fry scene, the first time I watched this movie, and this is back late 80s, I think it was on HBO or some other cable TV station, and I saw the Hitcher, and I really hadn't heard much about it. Didn't have a lot of expectation, but I was really mesmerized by it. But the first time I'm watching that scene, I thought maybe Jennifer Jason Leigh's character, Nash, is in on this. Maybe
Oh.
is she the one that served the finger? And then I kind of got the feeling, no, it must have been that Ryder infiltrated the restaurant, must have put the finger in there somehow. He must have slipped into the kitchen because he's very good at slipping in and slipping out without being seen, almost
Mhm.
in a supernatural way. So then I realized, well, that's what's really going on here. Jennifer Jason Leigh's not involved. She's not mixed up with Ryder. She's actually, as it turns out, for a while, the only person who believes Jim Halsey that
Mm,
he
mhm.
is not a killer, that he is telling the truth about this crazy guy, John Ryder. No one else is willing to believe it. At first, the police are not willing to believe it, at least not until they sit down with Jim Halsey and they realize he's not a killer. But before they can do anything, those guys are slaughtered. And other police who don't know the full story, they start to think that Jim Halsey is guilty as well. But Nash, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, turns out to be the only person really
Mhm.
who will take Jim's story at face value. Um, when I first saw this movie, Tracy, I was really hooked by it, mesmerized by the tension established by Rutger Hauer's mysterious character. It's very unpredictable. And you look back, and it's one of Rutger Hauer's most iconic roles. But it's interesting, he was not the first choice. Initially, this role of John Ryder was offered to another phenomenal actor, Sam Elliott. But Sam Elliott had a scheduling conflict, and he had to turn down the role. Hauer was actually the third choice. It's hard to imagine anybody other than Rutger Hauer doing it, but he was the third choice. But he turned out to be perfect for the role and apparently handled much of the stunt driving on his own. You sent me
Wow.
some interviews that Rutger Hauer had done with one of his fans where he talked about this film, and he was just blown away by the script. He had never worked with a director before, but he thought the director was outstanding. And he apparently knew while he's making the film that this is going to be something special. He was really sold by the script when he saw it, and it ended up being one of his signature parts. I think Hauer, who passed away a few years ago, is probably
Mhm.
best remembered for Blade Runner, but The Hitcher might be his second most iconic film. So he's legendary in this movie. C. Thomas Howell, very young at the time, also very good as an innocent, naive young man who makes some bad decisions, but generally is good-hearted. And Jennifer Jason Leigh, also outstanding. So the three lead characters all do great jobs. After the filming, by the way, Howell admitted that he was genuinely frightened by Hauer because of the veteran actor's intensity, which never waned during the filming, even when the camera was off. Years later, though, I was able to meet C. Thomas Howell at a Scaricon convention. It was probably about 10, 12 years ago. Very nice guy. I talked to him for a few minutes, and we talked primarily about the Hitcher and about Hauer. And C. Thomas Howell said he really came to respect and admire Hauer. He said he learned a lot about the art of acting from that experience working with Rutger Hauer. So I thought that was really interesting. And this was before Hauer passed away.
Mhm.
So Howell went from kind of being scared of him to really respecting the job that he did, and he used it as a learning experience. I'm curious, Tracy, who stood out as the best performer for you? Was it Hauer? Was it Howell, or are they both top of their game here?
Oh, that's such a hard question.
Well, that's why I asked it.
I know, right? Um, well, okay. So I've always really liked C. Thomas Howell, especially from like all his 80s roles. There's just so much nostalgia there for me. And besides, like I'll admit he's a little cutie patootie too.
Yeah.
So, you know, that just I remember him in Red Dawn and The Outsiders. Like
Mm,
I love those movies growing up as a kid. So this he was great. He carries the emotional weight of this movie. You're with him like the entire time. I felt bad for him. I felt scared for him. I felt exhausted for him.
yeah.
And, just like his sheer desperation. But Howard is the one who left like the biggest impression on me. He was like quiet, so intense, and just like overall really unsettling. He wasn't like loud and over the top and
No.
grandiose. He was just like calm and deliberate and just like that confidence, like, I know exactly what I'm doing and I'm going to kill you.
Yeah. He doesn't really lose his temper at any point, does he?
Not at all. Not at
Yeah.
all. Not even like up at the very end. Like he was just so straight and so narrow and just like so, yeah, scary.
Yeah.
But I mean, Howell gave it heart, but Howard is the performance that you're gonna remember, and,
Yeah.
I love them both. They both had, like, such different personalities in this movie. They worked so well together, but I can't choose. I like one for each reason, and they were just the 2 characters themselves were so connected, and, like, I'm curious, Bruce, like, Ryder, did he randomly just, like, choose Jim, or did you think there was something a little bit different there? Just the way that he kept reappearing and he was, like, always there. It's like you mentioned supernatural earlier,
Yeah.
and I kinda wondered, like, what like, is it a supernatural connection or, like,
Hmm.
what was the deal with that? Like, there was just, like, something so weird because there's like one scene and like I swear it's like I was wondering like, is this guy the devil?
Hmm. Yeah.
Like a mind reader. Like it was like so weird.
I've been reading a lot about this movie, and some people looking back at this film, they say that there's almost a kind of a gay relationship here, that there's romantic feelings between the two characters. I don't know that that's what's going on here, but there
Mhm.
is a connection that
Yeah.
you have between them. And my theory is that John Ryder was kind of impressed by the way that C. Thomas Howell's character, Jim,
Mhm.
threw him out of the car.
Yeah.
Ryder, I'm sure, has been killing people and stalking people for a long time and getting away with it. And now he's run into somebody that actually can match him in some ways.
Mm.
Even though he's this young kid, and very naive, stupidly brings in a hitchhiker, even says it. He says, I shouldn't be doing this, right? But he feels bad for him. He's out in the rain in the middle of the night. So he wants to help him out. But I think Ryder is looking at Jim Halsey as, this guy can go toe to toe with me. And he does have opportunities from there on in to kill him. He could have killed him at any point before they met up with that construction worker or after that. Could have killed him just about anywhere. But he wanted to sort of test him and then toy with him. And then he wants to frame him. And I guess he feels like maybe that's the punishment that it should render. It shouldn't kill him, but I'm going to put him in such hot water with the police that he's going to be in prison for a long time. And for a while, you get the feeling that's what's going to happen to this poor Jim Halsey.
Absolutely.
But he is able to convince the police something else is going on. And then as John Ryder becomes more brazen, he starts doing things like he's shooting the helicopter, and there's witnesses, there's cars, there's police cars around. So the word is starting to get out, I think, that Ryder is the problem, not Jim Halsey. So he's so brazen at that point, and he's just doing whatever he can to kill as many of these officers that he's sort of revealing himself.
Yeah.
So by the end of the movie, again, without giving too much away, Jim Halsey he's free. He is obviously a victim of John Ryder. They bring him in as a witness. They're trying to find out what Ryder's motivation was. They have Ryder in police custody, and Jim Halsey is basically free, but he can't let it go at that point. He needs more of a extreme resolution to the situation, and that leads to the final confrontation on that highway. So that's kind of what I feel. I don't think these guys had some kind of a bromance or anything like that, as has been suggested. I think Rutger Hauer's character is just impressed. This kid was able to throw me out the car. This is a real challenge for me. And I got to play this out, and I got to see, how far I can push this kid. That's what I felt. I don't know what your thought is. That's kind of what I felt.
Yeah. I was like, I think I felt it was like I guess like just like a different kind of like a supernatural connection. Like I honestly at one point thought that Hauer's character of John Ryder, I thought he might have been like the devil or some kind of like a demon or something. Just but I didn't
Some
know.
people have said that.
Have they really?
Yeah, some people say they feel John Ryder represents the devil. Maybe he does. I don't know.
Yeah, it was just very, very different. Very different. Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I don't think Jim Halsey had any good feelings for John Ryder. He didn't want this. He knew that this guy was not going to be held captive by the prison system.
No.
And he knew that he had to have a final confrontation with him. And that's what ends up happening. Interesting, in a poll conducted by Entertainment Weekly, The Hitcher was actually voted the 19th scariest movie of all time. Think about that. And the first time I watched it, it really was scary because I watched it alone. I watched it at night. I didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, it's a frightening film the first time you see it. There's a lot of creepiness, there's a lot of suspense, and there's a lot of sheer violence in this movie. Thanks largely to Hauer, but also aided by Howell as an innocent young man who really proves himself a worthy opponent. The Hitcher is absolutely one of the best horror films from the 1980s. And I'll say this, Tracy, in the past, I've given this film 3.5 stars, and then I rewatched it earlier this week to prepare for this show. And I have even more appreciation for it. So I'm going to up that. I'm going to revise from 3.5. I'm going to go 4 stars.
Wow.
The 1986 version of The Hitcher. So that's my ranking. What do you say?
Oh, I thought it was a really great movie. I was literally on the edge of my seat as I was watching it. It was so tense, and I loved, C. Thomas Howell and Rutger Hauer. They were both phenomenal, and they just did such a great job. It was just such a tense movie. My heart was pounding, and I gave it 3.5 stars, but you know, it probably is a 4, but I did for this one, I did give it 3.5, but it was great. It was great. I didn't feel it was like because it was an early '80s movie, like, I didn't feel it was dated at all, like, it
No.
didn't have, like, that dated feeling at all, which I thought was huge because I remember watching it, like, way back in the day and then just rewatching it. It still felt good to watch.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that's a great point you make up. And because it's a film that's primarily outdoors on the highway,
Mhm.
it looks like highways of today. Aside
Absolutely.
from the make and models of the cars involved, you watch this movie and you say, this could be a 2026 film
Yep.
because, the clothing that they're wearing is almost a non-factor.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of indoor settings. So, fashions of the 1980s don't factor into it. This is set out on the highway in the desert somewhere in Texas, and it looks pretty much the same today as it did back then. So that
Mhm.
gives this film a timelessness. It really does hold up very well.
Bruce, I'm curious, and I just found this out last night. There's actually a Hitcher 2. It's called The Hitcher 2, I've Been Waiting. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
I
I
watched
have
the
not
first
seen
30
that
minutes.
one.
Okay.
You did?
I
Yeah.
did, I watched the
I have
first
not seen that one.
okay. So I watched the first, I don't know, maybe 35, 40 minutes, and
Okay.
C. Thomas Howell, he comes back as Jim Halsey, um, and this time he is a police officer. So
Wow.
it's an interesting take because it kind of like picks up in that same spot. Um, but the only thing is, like, after the first, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, there is something, like, not great that happens, and then you really don't wanna watch the rest of the movie, and I think it's, like,
Yeah.
an hour and 45 minutes. So I did not watch it after a certain point. I was like, "Man, that sucks." And then I
Jeez.
I was like, "No." But the other character that they brought in to kind of like not replace Howard's role, but um give a different spin because it's a totally different character. It's not John Ryder. This fella's name is actually Jim, and I don't think they gave him a last name, but he's played by Jake Busey. So you think how
I
yeah,
have seen that one.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I have seen that movie.
Did you watch all of it? I
Yes.
skipped through it.
I didn't know it was called The Hitcher 2. I thought it was just a remake of it.
Yeah, no, it was The Hitcher too. It was
Really?
because Jim Halsey, he's like now he's older, he's like in his 50s. And I wanna say it's
Okay.
like from 2000, is it 2005
All
maybe?
right. And is this
Yeah.
with Sophia Bush?
Nope, this is not with Sophia Bush. That is a true legit remake. So,
That's the one I saw. I did not
yeah.
see this one then.
Yep,
Yeah.
this one has Jake Busey playing the hitchhiker guy.
Yeah.
Um, and it's actually Jim Halsey, played by C. Thomas Howell. He's just like now he's in his 50s. He's a police officer, being mentored by the police officer from the original Hitcher film.
Hmm.
And, yeah, there's some tragic twists and turns to this movie. Um, but yeah, at like I want to say like the 38-minute mark, I was like, something happens, it's not good. And I was like,
Okay.
okay, so I'm fast forwarding and I'm like jumping through just to get to the end to see what happens.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's not of the same caliber as the Hitcher movie.
Okay.
Um, but it was interesting to see the character, like probably what, like I think it was they jumped like 15 or 20 years in time, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, to see him like that. It's an interesting watch, at least for the first 35 minutes or so. But then you'll know what I mean when you go to watch it.
Okay.
You,
And what were
you
the reviews like for this movie?
Oh my gosh. Well, I did look on IMDb after I watched it, and everybody was like rating it like a 2 out of
Oh, wow.
10 or 2.5 out of 10. Kind of like, how dare they even try to do anything
Yeah.
as a sequel to the original film? Um, yeah, the only really good thing about it was just to see where Jim Halsey was in the future, like what the tragedy was that he experienced when he was a kid
Mm.
in the original movie, and to see that he's a cop now being mentored by somebody that he knew in the past. Um, and then just Jake Busey, holy moly, macaroni. He was just like, he was bananas. He was so crazy. And you got like that same type of, I guess, feeling that you might have got from Hauer's character, but
Yeah.
Hauer was just so much better. Busey was just like wackadoodle crazy.
Yeah.
Just interesting, just interesting. But like I said, after that incident happens at, like, the 35-minute mark, it just goes downhill from there,
Yeah.
and it's yeah, no. So, I was curious if you had watched it. I just discovered it last night.
Yeah. I have not seen that one. The other one I saw was a pure remake. It was Jake Busey in that role. Sophia
Okay.
Bush is his victim. She has a boyfriend in the movie. I forget who's playing him, and that was not a bad movie. I thought Busey did a pretty decent job. I mean, it's hard to follow in the footsteps of Rutger Hauer, but I thought it was
Mhm.
okay. But I'll have to watch this Hitcher too, because for whatever reason, I've never seen that one. I did not know that they brought C. Thomas Howell back for any follow up, so I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, I will send you the link to the movie. And
Yeah,
that's so interesting. So in the Hitcher remake, Jake Busey was in that too. Oh, that's
yeah.
interesting. Do you know what
If I'm
year that
remembering
was?
it right, yeah.
Hmm.
And
Huh,
he, of
I'll have
course,
to
is the
look
son of
into it.
Gary Busey.
That's right.
Jake Busey, he's a very good actor. I actually saw him at a Scaricon years
Oh,
ago,
wow.
and he was great on a panel. He gave excellent answers. He was very well spoken, had good insights. Not a big fan of some of his co-stars in a film called Identity.
Hmm.
That's a film that starred John Cusack and the late Ray Liotta.
Oh,
And
really?
Busey was not high on either of those guys. He said they
Mhm.
both had enormous egos and they really kind of played up the whole angle. We're the stars. Everybody else is just supporting players. They were kind of divas. He didn't like that. And he was very honest about it.
Wow.
Everything I've seen him in, and usually he's some kind of a villain or some kind of a heavy, but he does a very good job. And
Yeah.
I've always been curious about his relationship with Gary, his father.
Mhm.
Gary has had a lot of physical struggles. He was in a motorcycle accident. He's had health problems since. He's had some,
Yeah.
kind of strange public outbursts. But Gary Busey at his peak was a tremendous actor. He did some great stuff in the late 70s, throughout the 80s. I mean, who will forget him in Lethal Weapon?
Oh,
And I
right.
think Jake's a pretty good actor too. So
He is.
I'm curious to see the Hitcher too. You've given me an assignment for the next couple of days. All right,
I'm
that'll do it for this week's show. We talked about two very different films, but two worthwhile films in our minds. The first one, the new Dracula with Caleb Landry Jones. Tracy gave it 3 stars. I went 3.5. And of course, we've been talking about the classic from 1986, The Hitcher. Tracy went 3.5 stars, and I've upgraded to 4 stars on that. Tracy, as always, thank you. Good stuff.
Thank you, Bruce. It's been interesting. Thank you.
Our thanks to Tracy. Our thanks to all of you for listening and watching. We appreciate the fact that you have joined us in this museum of the macabre, and it very much is. And we hope you'll join us again the next time, right here in the Ghostly Gallery.